Hi Trudy, thank you for your time today. My name is Emmy from BTN and I'll be conducting this interview.
I'm so glad to meet you, Emmy.
Thank you. Today we had a special event with the title The Liberated and Joyful Heart, How to Embody Love in a World That Needs Our Care. Would you mind to talk about that today?
Yes, we just had this event which was wonderful to dedicate an entire event with several speakers, all of them very accomplished teachers, to this subject of how do we embody love in a world that needs our care. And what we realize is that the way that we can embody that love, and by embodiment we talk about making it real, making it actual, as opposed to an abstract idea, oh how wonderful it would be to be loving. But how do we actually manifest that in our lives? Well, we have to have a joyful and free heart to be able to do that. And so that was why we picked that title. And also because this time of year, even though in the world there are many, many difficult things going on, and especially with the government of our country right now, but at the same time it is still the season of the shortest days, the return of the light with the solstice, and a time when people from different cultures and different spiritual traditions are all celebrating. So we want to bring in the joy, but also the acknowledgement and recognition of the importance of liberation, of freeing our hearts from the things that hold us back or create difficulties and unwise situations in our lives.
Can you talk about how through meditation practice, how we can cultivate compassion and loving kindness, and how those kind of practices can help one's life?
Yes, I'm just smiling because it's a big question. Of course, the meditation and self-compassion, the mindfulness and self-compassion practices that are derived from and actually part of Buddhist psychology and Buddhist meditation tradition, these practices are, I feel, essential in showing us how to be present with the different things that happen in our lives, how to approach the moment of experience or the moment of connection with each other in a way that is as balanced and clear and kind as possible. And when I thought about meditation when I was younger, all I could think about was enlightenment. I want to be enlightened. It was, in a way, a kind of selfish project because it was completely focused on my own freedom and happiness. And my first teacher, the Korean Zen master, Daesan Snim, he always pointed us in the direction of helping other people. And gradually it became clear that the reason we are doing these practices is not just to free our hearts from suffering, although that's the first step and very important, but also to be able to contribute to the world in different ways, whether it's just through our hospitality and feeding people, sharing our lives with friends and family, or whether it's contributing in other ways that are more public and maybe more visible through social justice projects, through political engagement. All of these things, I think, are sustainable when we practice meditation. Without a meditation practice, it becomes really difficult for people to keep going without feeling burnout or compassion fatigue, things like that. It gets hard. Earlier we had Jon Kabat-Zinn's program, MBSR, the Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction. And his brilliance was in seeing how he could adapt the Buddhist teachings to be more accessible to a secular audience. And he did that through selecting mindfulness, which is the fulcrum, the balancing point for all the 7 factors of enlightenment. We have the 3 energizing or arousing factors, and then the 3 more calming, concentrative factors. But mindfulness is the one that balances them all, balances the joy, the investigation, the effort, and the calm, the concentration, the tranquility, the samadhi factors. So he picked mindfulness as the vehicle for presenting these teachings to the wider world. And then I think it was really about 20 years later, my close friend and colleague, Chris Germer, realized that a lot of people were now interested in and practicing mindfulness for health and healing, as well as for spiritual life. And he saw that for a lot of lay people practicing mindfulness, the practice could kind of devolve into a system of self-surveillance that was watching, but with a critical or judgmental eye. And that is not real mindfulness. Real mindfulness is compassionate and has a kind of loving awareness quality. But he felt that by making it explicit that we need to have compassion, that we need to have specific practices that help us soften our hearts, that this would be helpful to people. And he was right. It's really been helpful to a lot of people.
You briefly mentioned about how perfecting yourself can be for the benefit of the others. And that is one of the core teachings of the Buddha. Can you talk a little bit about the intricate relationship between Buddhism and meditation?
Yes, I suppose so. I was stopping and pausing to reflect because I think in my mind meditation is so Buddhist. But that's just because I have always practiced meditation in a Buddhist context. But it's true, the Buddha was very clear he told the story of the acrobats and how, if you've ever been to India, people still do this. There are these traveling acts that go from village to village, and often they do tricks and acrobatic performances. And so one time, according to the story, there was an acrobat, and I think she was practicing, her partner was either her father or her grandfather, I can't remember, but they had this argument. Should you be mindful about me and take care of me, and that will keep us safe when we're doing our act? Or should we each be most mindful about ourselves and then trust that that will keep us safe during our act? And they go and they ask the Buddha this question. And I remember thinking that each of them should really look out for the other person. And the Buddha said, no, actually, you should each take care of yourselves and be aware of where your body is and mindful of what you are doing. And that is the best way to take care of each other and the whole situation. So meditation, there are many different contemplative traditions. There's a Christian contemplative tradition, there's TM, which is a form of meditation that is done with a mantra practice that a lot of people here in Los Angeles do. And then there is meditation that is derived from Buddhism. And I guess that for me, meditation practice is at the heart of Buddhist practice. And that meditation can be taking different forms, like sutra chanting or walking, but just plain meditation practice itself, I feel it is the heart of Buddhist psychology to do that. And I'm not an expert on the other kinds of meditation. I have been practicing different kinds of Buddhist meditation, for example, in the Korean Zen tradition, Korean Son tradition, but I have also practiced some Japanese Zen and practiced Zen in China as well, and done a lot of Vipassana or Insight meditation practice, which is actually what we teach at our center because it's very accessible for people. And also I have done personal practice, quite dedicated for a couple of years only, but very intensively in the Vajrayana tradition of Himalayan Buddhism. And for me, I wanted to create a program that would reflect the way Nalanda University, the Buddhist university in the Middle Ages in India, was set up, where all three traditions were represented and you could learn from them all. And I think it's very joyful and very liberating to practice in the different traditions, and you see how each culture took the Buddha's teaching and adapted them to their particular cultural needs. And yet you can recognize the core teachings, the essential teachings of the Buddha across the different cultures. And there's something about that that I find very joyful and inspiring, that people can make the practice their own and make it fit with their environment. And yet the core teachings about suffering and how to know suffering and how to put an end to suffering, how to stop identifying with the ego mind all the time. These core teachings, they're found in all the Buddhist traditions. And I don't know why that makes me so happy, but it does.
When and why did you start meditation, and why do you think it's beneficial for many people to practice meditation?
So I started meditation because I was searching for something that would make sense of some of the spiritual experiences that I had had as a young woman when I was giving birth to my daughter in childbirth. I had my first really powerful spiritual opening, which happened very spontaneously. And I think it happened because by just accident of circumstances, I was alone a lot when I was in labor. And this is not a very usual situation. Usually a woman has company when she's in labor giving birth. But there were hours when I was alone, and I was so young, and I really didn't understand anything much about childbirth. I had never had a baby before. And I remember just sort of wanting it to be over because I was in pain, and I remember I was just staring at the tiles, the wall in the hospital room, because I had gone to the hospital to give birth, which was customary in those days. People were not doing home births yet. And I remember staring at the tiles, and they were starting to turn blue because it was twilight. And then just suddenly the whole room disappeared, and I had this experience of being the fulcrum, that sort of balance point between every being who had ever existed in the past and every being who would ever be born in the future. This just infinite chain of being. And the only way I can really convey the vividness of that experience was if you've ever been in a department store looking in those three mirrors, and you can see sometimes an infinite regress of reflections, that's what it was like, except that that's all there was. I wasn't even in the hospital room anymore. And I don't know that I was even me seeing this. It was just what appeared, but it was so powerful, and it gave me a lot of comfort to realize, oh, this is how mammals are born. This is how humans are born. This is birth. This is what it is. And I felt completely balanced on this sort of pinnacle of nowness with everything from the past, everything in the future, but it was just only ever now. And now and then the vision ended, but I felt a lot calmer afterwards. And then, of course, I gave birth to my daughter, and I never said anything about it. I just thought this is what happens when people have a baby. I thought everybody sees things this way. So I never talked about it to anybody. And then I got busy with being a mom and my household and my family and so forth. But then later, a couple years later, my daughter was 2.5 years old, and she became very ill with spinal meningitis, which is, there's a viral kind and a bacterial kind, and the bacterial is very serious, and that's what she had, the most serious kind. And she was dying in the hospital, in a coma. And I was a young mom. I think I was 23 or 24. And one time, she did regain consciousness. And by the way, she's fine today. She's the mother of my grandchildren. But she did regain consciousness, but wasn't out of the woods yet. She was still in danger. And I remember one time, it's what I don't know what you would say. We say she coded. In other words, the hospital puts out an alert that somebody is in trouble. And so all the doctors and nurses come to that person's room. And so that was happening. And there was this little tiny body, 2-year-old body in a hospital bed with, 6 or 7 doctors and nurses working on her because her veins had collapsed. And I'm the mom, and I'm sitting on the other bed watching this in kind of shock, of course. And suddenly, again, it was like the whole room opened up, and I just saw in that moment, I felt like I was seeing God. Like, this is what, I didn't have any words for Buddha or, I wasn't raised in a religious way. But I thought, this is what the divine or God, this is what it is. I would say now, this is what Buddha is. This is the activity of compassion, of these people working to save this little life. And just seeing this is the activity of compassion in the world. And so those experiences were very powerful. And maybe the way I'm telling it doesn't convey because it was an actual experience as opposed to telling about it. But after that, I felt like there must be somebody who understands these things that I'm seeing. And I don't know where to find that person. And so I began searching. And I will say that for my generation, many of us, one of the ways that we were searching for spiritual answers was through psychedelics, these plant medicines. And so I tried that. And I had other experiences of feeling like I was seeing God and connected to the divine. But something happened inside me, and I thought, why would I have to be stoned? Why would I have to take a drug or a medicine to experience this? As a human being, this is my consciousness. This is my mind. This is my heart. I should be able to have access to this way of seeing and understanding the world, meaning a way of seeing how interconnected we are and how perfect everything actually is. And it was just these enlightenment experiences, but I felt I want to find a way to access this that doesn't involve having to get a babysitter and do this whole trip. And that's when I began visiting spiritual teachers. And I would visit Indian swamis, and they would say, eat artichokes and say this mantra. And I would think, it's not right for me. Anyway, long story short, my friend Larry Rosenberg had found this Korean guy who was working in a laundromat in Providence, Rhode Island, and had started a Zen center. And he really liked him, and he invited him to Cambridge, Massachusetts, where I lived. And he invited him to, this was San Sanim, Venerable Sung San, and he wanted to learn English. So he enrolled in summer school at Harvard and started a Zen center. And then I went to hear him give one of his first talks there. And Emmy, he wasn't even saying anything that remarkable. He was saying, the wall is white, the floor is brown, the sky is blue. This was his way of teaching suchness. But I was listening to him and I just had tears. I thought, I could see in his eyes, I thought, he knows what I want to know. He knows. And so it just makes me cry even remembering. I just started practicing Zen with him, and that's how I started to meditate. And I practiced with him for a number of years while he was very involved with the Zen centers. And then he began starting Zen centers all over the world and traveling abroad, and so I found a teacher closer to home. But I am always grateful to him, and I wish I could tell him. I wish he was still alive and I could tell him. But he knew that I had become a teacher, and he had encouraged my teaching with my former husband, who was also his student.
You mentioned earlier about the MBSR and the MSc techniques, and I understand that Insight LA incorporates both of these teachings. How did you come to establish Insight LA, and can you talk a little bit more about how MBSc and MSc influenced the teachings?
Yeah. So I'll just start with Insight LA, which is, it started because I moved to Los Angeles for family reasons to help out some family members who needed some support. And so I came and I did that, and I thought, well, I'm here. I would like a place to practice. And I visited some practice groups, and I thought one was, just very, very heavy Asian, Japanese influence, and one was with a very challenging teacher, and I just didn't find the place that felt like the right place because I wanted to practice Zen mixed with insight meditation. And so I thought, well, why don't I just start a group where I'll sit and practice. I didn't have Insight LA in my mind at that time. I started a little sitting group with 2 people meeting in a friend's office at night and just moving the furniture. Very, very simple. But then it grew. And as it grew, then I began to have a vision for what Insight LA could be. And as it grew, I realized we need to be both Buddhist and secular at the same time. So we established, I taught certain Buddhist classes, but I also started teaching MBSR with Christiana Wolf at that time. And because I wanted us to be able to take part in our wider community than being what could happen, sort of marginalized as a Buddhist center and not really being allowed into hospitals and universities and prisons and places where we wanted to be able to also offer teachings. And it's probably different in Korea, being a country where there's so much established Buddhism. But here, I felt that we really needed to also have a secular branch. And MBSR, mindfulness-based stress reduction, was the most researched and scientifically proven effective method at that time. And then later, when MSc was created, mindful self-compassion, because it was a dear friend of mine who co-created that with Kristen Neff, Chris Germer, all of these interventions I feel are extensions of the Buddha's teaching, but we just don't call them that because it makes it more available and accessible to people who might be a little bit frightened or put off by, I don't want to become a Buddhist or something like this.
So as for Insight LA, how many centers do you have now? And what sort of people come to your centers? And what do you want to continue to cultivate out of Insight LA?
Great questions, great questions. So Insight LA has grown from our little group of beginning with 2 people in somebody's empty office at night where we had to move all the furniture, and I always had to bring the meditation cushions in my car, and it's just very homemade. That's what I meant by like cooking from scratch. It's very homemade. And we went from that, and for actually a few years I did that. I would always have the cushions in my car. We would drive to wherever we were going to practice. We didn't have a center. We would just rent different spaces, and we did that for a few years, really. And then it changed a lot when we got our center in 2008, because then there was something about having their own place that made people just feel more connected, I guess. And lots more people came. And then in 2012, we had the opportunity, which came in the funniest way, actually through my son-in-law. He had somebody working in his office, and they said, we know a nonprofit that has some land and they need to give it to another nonprofit. And there were some complications around it. And I said, no, it's too much. I'm already overworked. I can't do it. And my son-in-law, he said, I think you should come look at it. It's pretty nice. So I went and looked at it. It was beautiful. Its own little box canyon in the middle of Beverly Hills in Benedict Canyon. So it was a year of really a lot of work, just as I had feared. And Jack was saying to me, my husband, it's not worth it. Why are you working so hard for this? But I could see the future of being able to have a center that feels like it's in nature. You don't hear any cars. You don't see any houses. It's very protected. And you just hear birds. And anyway, so we have that. It's a house. And we have that place now where we do small retreats that are non-residential for the caregivers at the Veterans Administration, the VA hospital, for the professional caregivers, for the people who are critically ill and dying. We've had retreats for firefighters. We do targeted retreats. We do some of our trainings there, our facilitator trainings, and some teacher groups meet there. So that was our second one. And then just this past year, we had been searching for a space on the east side of LA, because we want to be, you ask what kind of people come, we want all kinds of people to come. We want to have people who are from all walks of life, not just affluent, middle-class, white people. So we were looking for a place that would be closer to communities of color and a more diverse population. And this past year, we found a place. One meditation group went out of business, and so we adopted their center in East Hollywood. And Mark, our director, has made it very much his pride and joy, that center. It just looks beautiful. You have to go see it. And indeed, it is a much more diverse place where I would say a wider variety of people come and practice there simply because of its location. And we are also training teachers of color so that people who come who are black or brown, or they can see people who look like them who are teaching, and that's very important. Along with the 3 centers that we have, we're also creating and welcoming people to affinity groups that are groups that you can join if you want to be able to meditate and practice with some people who are engaging with similar issues in their lives.
You're one of the first female teachers in maybe the West, and you've been intertwining psychotherapy and meditation in your practices. How do you go about in doing that?
So I am one of the first women to found her own center in our tradition. Not the first, but one of the first. And I think that my training in psychotherapy has been extremely helpful in that process. In Boston, because I lived much of my adult life, I lived and worked in Boston. I started and actually co-founded an institute for psychotherapy and meditation where we look at the interface between these 2 disciplines, and we see the areas where psychotherapy is super helpful and can do things that meditation practice won't heal, like especially questions of relationship. Obviously, they're not something you can solve practicing by yourself in silence on the cushion. And then, of course, meditation addresses existential questions that are beyond the scope of psychotherapy. And sometimes I think of it as psychotherapy. If 0 or 1 is the bottom of your life, where everything's going wrong and you're a mess, and 10 is, you know, the liberated and joyful heart, right? I think if psychotherapy can bring us from 0 to 5 very effectively, and then meditation and Buddhist practices can bring us from 5 to 10. So that's a very simplified way of looking at how they can work together, and the synergy between them is powerful, actually. Because meditators who understand about their emotions and know and learn how to handle their emotional lives are actually going to have a lot easier time with their meditation too. And people in therapy who learn how to work with their own minds, observing the process and the mechanisms of how the mind works from Buddhist psychology and meditation, are going to really be able to use that knowledge and benefit from their psychotherapy. So that's powerful synergy. But I would also like to say a few things about being a woman in this role of leadership, because I think that women are particularly well suited to creating collaborative structures around them. And I have, I think, been blessed to be free of some of the ego problems that my male colleagues get involved in. You know, it's very easy when people are looking up to you to begin to sort of get inflated and a little bit grandiose, and to start to believe maybe I am really that great as they think I am, instead of understanding that people, when they come, you know, they're bringing their best selves, they're admiring you and they don't know you at all. They're admiring their idea of who you are. And to begin, I feel like as a woman, I can understand this so much better and not make it be about me, per se. Of course, I use myself in my teaching. I use my life and what I've learned, but that's different. And even from the start with Insight LA, I didn't put a big picture of me on the website. My vision was always that other people would come, and they have. I've been joined by wonderful people. And that Insight LA would be a platform for them to grow and develop their own teaching and thrive in their work. That was always more my ideal. And I think this is a particularly, of course you can't make generalizations, not all women, not all men, but I do feel it's a female quality, this liking to do things in groups and be collaborative and discovering together, as opposed to I discover and then I tell you about my discovery. We are in dialogue, we practice together, we talk together, we discover together, if that makes sense. And I guess the other thing I want to say about being a female leader is that one of the feminine qualities that we value in everyday life, in spiritual life, is nurturing. And while we don't want women to be limited to nurturing roles at all, it is a kind of natural gift, I feel. And so that is a particular pleasure. Not, again, not all women feel this or care about this, but nurturing and teaching new people and empowering younger people also is something that I love. And this is going to help the Dharma. It's going to help Insight LA because our generation, we're getting old. We need the younger generations to care and benefit and see what a blessing it can be to practice and share the practices with others.
How do you relate to the world around you through the society and through Insight LA?
Thank you. That's a really interesting question, because one of the things that I learned from Daesan Snim, my first teacher, the Korean Zen master, is that we are really, he believed in what he called together action. that we're really together in this world and we need to work together and collaborate. So one of the things that we have been doing at Insight LA pretty much from the start is sharing the practices that are healing and beneficial with people in our society who are really suffering. We have a lot of people who are suffering from drug addiction. We have people who are sleeping homeless on the street. We have a lot of people, homeless people. We didn't have this when I was a girl, when I was a young woman even. It began to happen in the period with Ronald Reagan, and it just got worse and worse as community mental health clinics were closed and money was taken away from support for people. And so we have a lot of homeless people, we have drug addicted people, we have very violent gang activity involving young people. We also have a certain taboo about facing death, so that when people become terminally ill, when they're critically ill and dying, it's almost something they're ashamed of. I don't know how this is in Korea, but in this country that's changing. But like all changes in a culture, they take time. So we want to support the people who are either considered sort of outside of respectable society. How can we help their suffering? Our veterans, people who have fought in wars, they come back and they're very traumatized. They don't have marketable skills and enough mental health often to contribute as members of society, and they get marginalized and are part of the difficult populations that are suffering a lot. And so we have worked hard to be able to bring these practices for free to the people who need them and the people who work with these difficult people, because it's not easy to work every day with people who are either doing bad things or being very difficult or just having huge problems that feel unsolvable. So we send teachers to any place that asks us, and they work with the professional caregivers of all kinds, doctors and nurses and therapists and social workers and all kinds of people, to help them develop the resources, the inner resources to sustain being able to help these difficult populations that I've named a few of. And also, then they can teach the practices to the people they serve. So I feel that from the beginning, Sansanim emphasized service in different ways, and I'm very, actually, I feel very happy that Insight LA is extending our reach and extending our experience and knowledge to support people who are quite invisible. They would never come to a meditation center. You know, they don't either know how to find it, or they wouldn't feel they belonged. Maybe they don't have decent clothes, or, you know, they just wouldn't feel they belonged. And it makes me very happy to feel that we're also including this kind of suffering, in our work.
So thank you for your time today, Trudy. Can you give a brief message to the BTN viewers and also regarding your hopes in coming to Korea in 2021?
Yes, I want to thank you and all the BTN viewers for your interest in our work, and to tell you that whoever you are and wherever you are in your life, to practice meditation, while it may not be easy, will be such an important resource for you. And when you think about it, the most valuable things in our lives, raising our children, finding our work, they are not easy things to do, but they are so rewarding, and they give us a quality of life that we're grateful to have. And meditation is the same. And whatever you want from your meditation, whether it's more health or more sanity or more spiritual illumination, so that you can truly live with a joyful and liberated heart. All of this is possible. So I want to encourage all of the BTN watchers in your practice. Thank you, everybody. As for 2021, the idea that we might come to Korea is makes me very happy to consider. So I think we'll just offer our heartfelt wishes that this may come to pass.
Thank you once again, Trudy.
Thank you, Emmy.